What do you know about politics? What should you know? Forget views, beliefs, and opinions. Politics is really a science, and that's where we come in. Welcome to Inside Political Science. I'm Kirby Goodell.
I'm Todd Kent, and we're your guides to what's actually happening in politics. We're using our years of experience to navigate political data, media, money, behavior, and more to educate and inform you.
Welcome to Inside Political Science. I'm Kirby Goodell, and I'm here with my good friend Todd Kent. And Todd, it's Election Day.
This is what we look forward to every year, is all those election days that come up because it gives us a lot to talk about.
Yeah, but these, I don't know about you, but I have really mixed feelings about these off-year elections. They're intentionally designed to separate themselves from national political trends, even though sometimes they signal. We'll talk about that, but a lot of times they're low turnout affairs. There's all sorts of reasons not to really, for me anyway, as a political scientist, who I want to see higher turnout. I want to see more engagement. I want to see more involvement. There's a lot of reason kind of not to like these elections, huh?
Yeah, these off-year elections, which are typically state and local in nature, we, like here locally, we hardly have any contested races on. I think there's mostly school board races, and then some propositions that are on the statewide. But it reduces turnout, and I think that the kind of what we always call the rational voter says, it's going to take me a lot of effort to get out there and vote, and turnout is lower.
Yeah, and then on the really high-profile races, and so we have really four, I think, this year. In New Jersey, the governor's race. In Virginia, the governor's race. In California, the Prop 50 race over whether they can redistrict or not. And then on the big one for the Democratic Party, at least the future of the Democratic Party, is the New York mayor's race. And so those races start to take on really, presumably, what seems like national significance, though. Are they really national?
Yeah, that I think there's going to be a lot of effort to say, depending on, it looks like the Democrats are going to win in most of the races, and it may not even be that close. What does that tell us about Trump? And maybe it doesn't tell us anything. Just the fact that we would expect the Democrats to win those races they have in the past, in recent history. So it doesn't tell us that much, even though I think sometimes people try to make it more into it than it really is.
Yeah, and if you're the out party and you've just come out of an election year where you've suffered a big defeat, which the Democrats are in, a win feels really good to you, and it looks like, maybe we've turned things around. On the Democratic side, it looks almost certain that they're going to win in Virginia. There you have a race. Donald Trump didn't even endorse the Republican candidate, and it looks like the Democratic candidate by most polling is about 10 points ahead or so. And this is one of those races that I think goes to this point about be careful not to overinterpret the election, because Virginia almost always goes against whoever won the presidency the last time.
Right. And, here you got a state where the Doge folks kind of helped institute some layoffs, and a lot of those federal workers live in that Northern Virginia area. Yeah. So they're not going to think, most of them are not going to think kindly about Trump at this point. And so the Democrats were in a good position.
Yeah, and it's really hard to see them losing there. In New Jersey, though, depending on the poll, and I'm sure you've looked at some of the polls as well, some of it makes it look like it could be pretty much a dead heat. It's very possible that the Republican Jack Ciattarelli could do better than expected. He's polling a little bit behind Mickey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate there. And so there is a possibility that Republicans will win, and I think people will interpret, because New Jersey is traditionally a blue state, and I think people will overinterpret that if that happens. But that's also a case where you have a Democratic governor. You have this sort of anti-incumbency. People are still not really settled on the economy and really not happy on affordability issues and on what's going on in the economy. And in New Jersey, that could play out to the Democrats' disadvantage.
It could, and I do think the Democrats are going to win in New Jersey. I think it's going to be a lot closer than Virginia. But previously the last 4 years ago, it was a pretty close race for governor.
Yeah.
And what can the Republicans kind of, maybe do better? It's going to be interesting. I'm a little skeptical. I think that the mood in there is going to lean with the Democrats, but it's going to be a very interesting night to watch as the returns come in. But there's a lot of underlying things here, that the economy, jobs, what's happening. The shutdown. Who are people blaming for the shutdown? Yeah. All this can play a little bit, and if it's close enough, it just takes a percentage point here and there, and we can have a different result.
And in that election, Trump has come out and he has endorsed the Republican candidate, and the candidate Jack Ciattarelli, I think I'm saying his name right. Correct me if I'm not. He has just leaned into that endorsement, and so Trump's dominating the race in lots of important ways, and so it really kind of, I mean, you could argue that I don't think it's a referendum on Trump because it's a blue state and it's different, but and you have the Democratic governor, but you could say that Trump has really played heavily in that race.
Right. Oh, I definitely, and I think that what he wants to do is to get every Trump vote he can. And then hopefully that the turnout's a little lower, and maybe the Democrats don't come out in big numbers and gives him a chance. Yeah. But it's going to be an uphill battle. But I think that's he probably through polling figured out that's his best shot. Yeah. And that Trump's popularity there among certain voters is definitely what he can't lose those.
Yeah, and I think Trump recognized that he's close enough that maybe his endorsement could help push him over the edge. Maybe his endorsement could help get some people who wouldn't turn out otherwise. And so Trump was willing to endorse in that race. In Virginia, I think he looked at the race and said, not a shot.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just too much water has been under the bridge in the last in the short while, and it affected Virginia, and so it was going to be, as much as Republicans thought when they won the governor's office the last time, this could be a trend. Soon we found out it wasn't. Not that the governor didn't do a good job. I think it's just you got other stuff going on there.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge, I mean, we are seeing Trump is also playing a heavy role there in terms of advertisements, in terms of how people but affordability just continues to dominate a lot of the conversations around a lot of these different races. It's just really important across the board in terms of people feeling pinched financially.
Yeah, I looked at the latest Gallup poll where they asked the most important problem, and among economic issues, it was affordability.
Yeah.
Or kind of the inflation, which goes into affordability, and the overall economy. So it's still the number one economic issue that plays on voters' minds, and that's hard to overcome for any president.
Yeah. And in New York, we've talked about Zohran Mamdani before because he seems to be such a signal of what's going on in the Democratic Party. There is the progressive left wing that would like to move the country, and really, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say a socialist direction. And then there is the centrist wing, the centrist in this case, already beaten in the primary, Andrew Cuomo. Looks like he's going to be a two-time loser in one election cycle. It looks like Mamdani will likely win. But Mamdani has really been hitting on the affordability issues. And a lot of those are very populist left, free child care, free buses, affordable housing. He's hitting on all those themes that seem to resonate with voters, but maybe in a way that doesn't seem especially reasonable from a policy standpoint.
Well, that, and there's a lot of question. What can you actually do as mayor?
Right. Right.
How much power does the mayor have? And so there's going to be those issues, and I think that it's certainly probably my prediction. It's going to be overpromise. He's going to overpromise and underperform, because you're not going to be able to do all the things you want to do. Just the free buses is unbelievably expensive.
Yeah.
And child care, that would be just outrageous. I think that we have to look at the demographics of New York City now. Right. It's really changed over the years. I hope I'm right about this. 38% foreign born, and over close to 50% speak another language at home other than English. So it's a different type of clientele than as you think about the last 25 or 30 years in New York City, a lot of transition. We know that New York has lost House seats because
Right.
of people moving out. So it's changed, and so I think it's going to be very hard to beat Mondami today, and especially when you have somebody that's a Republican in there that's going to take, according to polls, get about 60% of the Trump vote.
Yeah.
But still finish third.
Yeah.
And so Cuomo needed to clear the deck to have a chance to win.
Yeah, but on the one of the things that sort of strikes me is there is something of a parallel to Mamdani in New York and Trump as he was initially running for the presidency, and Trump saying we're going to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. The promise seemed unreasonable. I mean, it highlighted an important issue, but the actual ability to do what he's saying seems questionable. And so when you talk about freezing the rent, can you really freeze the rent in New York? Is that a reasonable proposition in terms of leading a city and having, and not having negative consequences? Right. And I feel like we're in these populist moments where politicians are speaking to voters and speaking to their concerns, but maybe not in practical ways, maybe not in ways that are responsible if we think about what are you actually capable of doing. And you said you got to part of it. He's the mayor of New York. He's not. What can he do on some of these policies?
And that it remains to be seen and how much support he'll have. But it is interesting how you mentioned that he was kind of like Donald Trump in 2016. Trump identified a group of voters who felt they were forgotten, left out, and kind of came with a new way. And all the 16 other candidates in the race for president didn't get it. And so,
right.
And that's the genius of Donald Trump as far as a policy standpoint. And I think the question that I think we have to think about, on this show, we've talked about how the Democrats have not had a message. What's their message? What's the direction that we're going to go to win back the world and exert our dominance over politics? Is Mondami, is this the message?
Right.
I mean, is this the winning message? I think it remains to be seen, but you could see even mainstream Democrats a little hesitant to get on the endorsement bandwagon.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that everybody's convinced, but if he wins and gets successful, you may see a lot more.
Absolutely, and he is at a minimum. He's addressing this concern, right? And maybe it's but also if we go back to 2016, a lot of Republican establishment people thought Trump was a sideshow and he would go away soon enough and we'd have the real nominee. I think on the Democratic side, I think there's a lot of this real hesitancy to fully embrace this message and this idea, and we'll see whether the left can take over the Democratic Party the way the MAGA base took over the Republican Party. I don't know. I have my doubts, but I think it's a super interesting issue going forward.
Maybe we should suggest to the Democrats that they get a name like MAGA to represent this group that want,
Yeah.
And well, they become the power brokers when you have a an established group that you can clearly define. They do become power brokers when it comes to elections because you need their support, even though you don't always like their policies.
Right.
And so that's kind of what happened to the Republicans. They really had to kind of embrace Donald Trump because they needed the Trump voters.
Yes.
Which is about 30% of the Republican Party
Right.
is Trump or nothing voters. And so that's why we, for like the last 12 years, we've seen a lot of Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, and then in California, we have the California proposition to undo Texas. So with the Texas redistricting, potentially 5 seats added to the Republican Party. In California, it's more difficult. Normally, they have to have a nonpartisan commission do the redistricting. In this case, they put up a referendum that said, "Oh, just ignore that for this cycle, so that we can pay back Texas for redistricting, and we'll draw our 5 seats." I don't have a good sense on that one.
No, I don't either. I was thinking about today when on the news, I had the news down and I could see the closed captioning. that every time they go to California, Newsom is talking about Texas. He's talking about Governor Abbott. So it's, and I wanted to say, Texas is living in your mind, and maybe to focus on California, but that's what they're using. The politics is such that this is so important because even though we're kind of violating our own standards here, it's important because Texas is so bad.
Yeah, and if they're going to play that way, we can't show up with a knife to a gunfight, right? We have to do the same things they're doing. We have to play the game the way they've played it, and so we have to take this temporary measure, and then presumably what they're suggesting is they'll go back, but I don't think we're going back to the way things were before regardless. Underneath the issue, I think, is the interesting question of Gavin Newsom clearly has presidential ambitions. This is his fight. This is his chance to show that he's the messenger for the Democratic Party, and he can lead the fight and help lead to a Democratic, in his view, hopefully lead to a Democratic majority.
Yeah, I looked at some polls today just to look at kind of, because they're doing little horse races out there to see kind of who's leading, and Gavin Newsom was ahead, probably 10 points ahead of Kamala Harris, who was second, and some of the others. What was interesting to me about the Democrats, they didn't seem to have any new kind of exciting people coming up that they were testing.
Right.
It was kind of the same people that we've been around for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see if somebody will come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And in the Republicans, it looked like J.D. Vance was way ahead of everybody else, and it's a long time before we have another election for president. But it is interesting to see who the media and the pollsters think are the viable candidates out there. And even on the Republican side, you saw you have Rubio, Vance, and a few others, but it's at least they have the advantage of being in the administration now.
Yeah. The one other thing that's going on in this election cycle that I think we have to mention briefly, Texas has 17. We always have all these amendments. I was complaining to you before the show. I always want to vote no, but I will vote yes to lower my property taxes.
Well,
I don't like amendments just as a general. This is the job of the legislature to make policy. This is why we have representative government. But I understand this is the process, and I will make an exception if it lowers my taxes.
I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, we if you look at, we don't have an income tax, but we do have high property taxes.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking about property tax relief for at least the last 6 years or so, and so it's important. Texans, I agree. We need on the federal level and the state level. We need the legislatures to start taking some responsibility.
Yeah.
If you don't like something, let's do it, even if it means working with the other side.
Yeah, let's do the job. Let's not shut it down.
Exactly. I remember we got the Texas lottery because the legislature nobody in the legislature wanted to vote for it, because they thought it would hurt them. So they just threw it out to the voters, and the voters approved the Texas lottery. Yeah. And so I think it's an easy way out for legislatures to do that. And so I think that we need more, especially when you have a state that's dominated by one party. They ought to be able to pass what they want and then let the voters decide.
Yeah. Well, the last thing that I'm looking for is, in special elections going up into 2024, we saw the Democrats do especially well because increasingly they are the higher educated voters, and we've seen this realignment of the political parties. Democrats, high propensity voters, more of them. That doesn't mean that Republicans aren't high propensity voters, but more Democrats turn out for everything these days. And then Republicans really are motivated by Trump, or at least enough of them. And so what I'm really interested in is what's going to happen with voter turnout, and whether that pattern seems to hold in these statewide elections. Because if it does, you would expect the Democrat to run a little bit above their polling, and you would expect the Republican to do a little bit worse. And I'm not sure that's the case, but that's my expectation going in.
Well, that historically, at least in my work, with Republicans is what you see is what you get. I mean, whenever they're polling, that's the number you got. But I think things have changed.
Yeah.
I think the Republicans would like to see bigger turnout, especially with Trump if Trump's on the ballot. But we know the turnout's going to be much lower than a presidential race, and get out the vote becomes everything now. So mobilization used to be something you did at the end of the campaign. Now it's everything.
Yeah.
Because there's hardly anybody is ever persuaded by a campaign.
Yeah.
They may be motivated by a campaign, but they're not persuaded to change their minds.
Right.
And I think as we've seen the parties separate from each other so far that for me to go from one party to the other party is too far.
Yeah.
For most people, and that's why you have a lot of people saying I'm an independent now.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think the turnout's going to be lower, and that I think that favors the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see the results tonight. I don't know if we'll have a result in New Jersey if it's as close to some of the polls, but on the rest of the races, I think we should know who's won, and we should have some sense of the direction, or at least what these signs are pointing to, and then we can be ready for the media to overinterpret the signals. So that's it for this segment. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the government shutdown, Trump tariffs, and Dick Cheney.
Discover what inspires some of the world's most creative people.
Getting to know my culture has helped me understand that there is an importance in the past and our traditions.
The Arts Hour is your weekly showcase of the best global arts and culture.
Space for adventurous people to do imaginative things.
That sounds amazing.
The Arts Hour from the BBC.
Sunday mornings at 6 on Aggieland's Public Radio, KAMU.
My name is Max Crawford. I'm the Chief Meteorologist at KBTX.
I'm Ann Black, Executive Director of Opus. I have listened to Fresh Air every afternoon that I possibly could have the radio on.
I love Sesame Street because I love Elmo.
Can you tell me how to get to?
KMU TV and FM have supported community engagement with entertainment and educational programming.
KMU houses the technology that's responsible for issuing emergency alert system messages out to the community.
It's also a great source of information about arts and entertainment.
Federal funding in public television, public radio is being cut back and being threatened by federal funding reductions.
Join us in supporting KAMU by making a donation today. Go online to KAMU.tamu.edu.
Welcome back. Todd, we were talking a little bit about the elections, and one of the things that we were talking about was it would be nice if some of these legislators, and legislatures were doing their job, including federal government, which is now on day 35. After today, we set the record for the longest government shutdown.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about who's getting blamed for this.
Yeah.
And a lot of the early polls said slightly the Republicans the Democrats are a little bit more blamed, but it seems like it has shifted a little bit. At least that's what some of the national polls have said, which is interesting because I think they've actually had 13 votes. To do a continuing resolution that would just continue it from the spending from where it was in the future. But I think when things are going bad financially, you blame the party in power.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the tricky thing with a government shutdown is always if Democrats controlled the chamber, I think it's possible that they could get more of the blame, but that also leaves open with Republicans in control, it's harder to blame the Democrats, especially when it's about the 60. Now, one of the things that looks like it's possible and that Trump has suggested, and he's got some criticism for it, because not just for the idea, but because there's some negotiation going on between the political parties, and Trump is telling them to go nuclear, get rid of the filibuster, pass the continuing resolution. That's one possible way to end the shutdown, right?
That is the possibility. I actually heard a senator this morning on the news talking about that. And his idea was not maybe don't get rid of the filibuster, but have like if the shutdown lasts more than 10 days, maybe there's something that happens. I think every time the filibuster is not applied to something that it used to. It causes problems. We've seen that with the judges.
Yes, yes.
And so it's one of those things where you can not win the battle but lose the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, in my opinion, the Republicans have been really bad when it comes to messaging on this whole shutdown. I don't know what they have not been able to make the case that they've offered to keep the government open at the same rate that it was for a period of time, and the Democrats have rejected it 13 times. So if they can't win that battle, it's hard to. Maybe there's other things going on that we're not thinking about.
Yeah, and Democrats have their own set of issues because I don't think – so the Republicans have been very consistent sort of saying this is the Democratic shutdown, but it's hard to call it the Democratic shutdown when you actually hold all the levers of power. On the flip side, Democrats talk about rising health insurance premiums, which looks like if we don't end the shutdown, they actually will rise, and they might rise depending on how the shutdown happens. And so people are going to experience some pain, but it's hard to buy into the idea that you're shutting down the government to keep this bad thing from happening that's going to happen if you shut down the government.
Right.
The logic here on both sides seems to be a little bit strained to me, and I think the sort of the real basis of it is Trump doesn't mind the shutdown because it increases his political power. Republicans in the House and Senate, I think, have to be a little less confident about that. Democrats don't mind the shutdown because there's plenty of people in their base who are saying, fight these guys. You're getting rolled all the time. Trump's walking all over you. Stand up.
No, I agree that they, for a long time now, they just haven't seemed to have any fight and any ability to do anything. There's two interesting things that work in here. One is you have the SNAP benefits.
Yes.
And SNAP people that have SNAP benefits, are they Democrat voters? Are they Republican voters? And so how is that going to play into this? Also, we're getting close to Thanksgiving, which is one of the biggest travel days of the year.
Yeah.
And I know, like here in Texas at Houston, there was a 6-hour wait to get through security because some of the TSA agents decided to take some time off and go do a side job,
Yeah.
And so which kind of base is going to fold first?
Right.
Because I think they're both nervous about it.
Right.
I think there's Democrats and Republicans that say, we need to get this done.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the really bad things about this, if you think about it from the standpoint of the American people versus the politicians can be playing a partisan game of do I win or do I lose? And that works fine during the early days of the shutdown before people start really experiencing pain. But we're moving into a period where we're going to see some real pain. And that you mentioned the SNAP benefits, the food stamps, people are going to not have as much money for food. You have the air traffic controllers and the situation of airports getting – once people really start to feel pain, they're going to blame someone. Right. And it's sort of a gamble on the part of the two parties of, well, I think they're going to blame you more than me, so let's roll the dice and see if I win this game of chicken, right?
And that's exactly right. So I think given what you've just said, I would think that we would see some resolution sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
That this can't go on because there comes a point where nobody's a winner.
Yeah.
And even be able to you can't even claim victory because the fact you're part of the problem is a problem. So I think that hopefully we're near in the end. I mean, because it's really tragic in so many ways. You've got people that have benefits that they live by, and then you have people that are working but not getting paid.
Right. And
you just have basic lifestyle that they're going to blame somebody. And you start thinking, okay, what do the Democrats get if they win? I guess they get the fact that, hey, we stood up to those evil Republicans. What do Republicans get if they win?
Right.
That we kept the deficit down, or something like that. Sometimes it's the story is harder to tell when you're for the Republicans, I think.
Well, and I think a lot of the average voters look out and they say, wait a second, these people aren't getting paid, but you are. And in some ways, you feel like if and we've tried to set this up and make it more difficult to shut down the government by making sure that there is some pain being experienced, but it feels like it takes a while for that pain to really kick in. And by the way, I'm not pro pain.
Right.
That propane, but I think one of the reasons why they do it is I think they're not experiencing if the effects of a shutdown were immediate and profound and it affect the elected representatives, we would not be playing this game.
Right, that's exactly true. Go ahead.
No, and instead, it takes a while to kick in, and then the people start feeling it. You mentioned the partisanship of the SNAP beneficiaries. Most of we don't have really good data on who those folks are and what their partisanship is, but we can kind of get a sense that they're probably slightly more Democratic than Republican, but not by a wide margin. And so at least not in the most recent, in the contemporary period. And so that means that there's some bipartisan effects of this.
Yeah. And, given the fact that I think you're right, I think there is a kind of a bipartisan effect. You're seeing a lot more where the states are beginning to weigh in.
Yes.
Governors saying we're trying to get some money to help our people, and you're seeing mayors do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it eventually it begins to harm the national parties.
Yeah.
You're playing games. You're playing political games with people's lives, and that's always a hard message to overcome.
Yeah, and you mentioned ending the filibuster is one of those issues that sometimes these people make rules changes for short-term benefit, and then they realize they regret it later. And judges are the great example because Democrats sort of started that ball rolling downhill. On this particular issue, it's interesting. There are lots of Democrats, especially progressives, who have been arguing we need to get rid of the filibuster forever because they believe the majority would support their side. Yeah. And this is one of those issues that I think, if the short-term benefit is to the Republicans to get the government and turn the lights back on and get it moving again, the long-term, it's not as clear where the benefit is and who wins and who loses because of the change in the rules.
Well, the filibuster is kind of the big check on government.
Yeah,
you can't move that fast, and you at least to get through the Senate, you got to have a little more than 50%.
Yeah,
and so I think that it's one of those things. In the short run, it looks good, but long term, there's a time when you're going to be out of power, and somebody else can make hay of that fact that there's no more filibuster.
Yeah,
and so I think it's. I doubt that they will make a move on the filibuster now, even though Donald Trump seems to like to do things, just get it done, quickly, whatever you have to do it, but really not thinking about the future.
Yeah. Well, we're taping on Tuesday, November the 4th. It's Election Day. Tomorrow, November the 5th, the Supreme Court hears arguments on whether Trump can set tariffs or not. I think this is just a hugely fascinating case for all sorts of reasons. Does the president have this power? Does a court, especially a set of justices who have been more traditionally conservative, more originalist in their interpretation, would they be willing to say that Trump can use this power based on the emergency provisions that he's called into play, which have not been used for tariffs before, and there's no precedent of use? I think this is just an incredibly fascinating issue.
I agree with you. It's going. I can't wait to read the opinion because to find out what this court's view is of separation of powers.
Yes.
And the checks and balances in our government, which we have been there from the start. But it's going to be very interesting because we're going to get a modern look at it.
Yeah.
How much authority does the president have when it comes to foreign trade? Mm-hmm. Usually in foreign policy, the president has had almost unlimited power,
right?
Democrats and Republicans alike, but this is a new area.
Yeah, and
so it's too bad we don't have a court scholar here that can kind of tell us what they think is going to happen. But I think it's going to set the stage for the remaining time of Trump's presidency.
Yeah, and we won't hear the decision for quite some time, because what they'll do is they'll hear the arguments. We will be, and you'll see this this is another thing where we can pick on the media a little bit. They'll be really closely interpreting. This justice asked this question. It seems like they're skeptical. This justice phrased it this way. And justices do lean a little bit in terms of who they question and how they question and where they seem to want the argument to go in the oral argument. So it's not like it's not a tell at all, but there's also going to be a lot of interpretation of which way this might go.
Yeah, there are signals. Everybody kind of signals their own, and how hard they ask the question. Kind of the body language. So that's going to be interesting. So it's going to be very important. I mean, and I think the Trump administration feels like it's incredibly important because they've they've kind of staked so much into it.
Yeah.
Now, It sometimes when you get a loss, you can blame it on somebody, and so I guess they could pull back and blame the courts that they didn't get it would have worked if they just would have let me do it.
Yeah, and Trump has, I forget what language he said specifically, but in typical Trump fashion, he said this is the most important case of his presidency or maybe of American history.
No, he kind of said in history.
Yeah.
And which that's probably an overstatement.
Yeah. But it pits these two interesting theories, one of them of limited presidential power, and especially of checks and balances, and especially of Congress, especially controlling things like taxes and tariffs and this type of, and it pits that against the idea of expanded executive authority.
Right.
And like I said, if you go back even to the Constitution, if you go back to the founders, some people are all about the originalists, but you can sort of imagine Hamilton being on the side of the president and Madison being on the side of the Congress, saying and of the lawsuit, saying, no, you don't have this power. This is the Congress. And Hamilton saying, no, we want we want a strong president.
Right. And yeah, I mean, things never change. They really don't. The things we argued about back then, we're still arguing about. It is interesting. There's a lot happening. It's one thing you can say about Trump is that he keeps the ball moving a lot, and so you wake up and he's overseas somewhere, and he's at a rally in the U.S. the next day. So it is in the short presidency, the short time we've had that he's been president, a incredible amount of things have happened.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is they've happened without the legislature, without the Congress. And so that's something that, you hope that the American people will say, look, we expect our elected officials to actually do something, to weigh in. That's what we elected you for. And so in a lot of ways, Trump is dominating the game.
Yeah. The one last part of this that I think is super interesting, assuming that you had a Democratic, how the court decides is really important, not just for Donald Trump, it's for the future. You could have a Democratic president follow Donald Trump and say, based on the emergency powers granted to the presidency, based on the president of Donald Trump, climate is an emergency. I'm raising tariffs to pay for combating climate change, and to be able to do that without Congress.
No, it's exactly what we talked about with the filibuster. You be careful what you wish for, because you may get it, and it'll come back to hurt you in the future. So that's exactly right. And especially when you take something that's really never been done and you kind of maneuver it into to help you, that's when you really begin to get in trouble as leadership. There's theories on presidential leadership, and one is that a president is not really a leader, but he's a facilitator. He takes what's available to him and works it. And certainly, Donald Trump, he doesn't facilitate well. He's taken the country in directions that he wants to go, and that he's probably thought about for a long time, and people have talked to him. But it's opening new territory, like tariffs. Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up the whole lifetime where tariffs were bad.
Right.
The idea that tariffs caused the Great Depression. So and all of a sudden now they argue tariffs. This is a good thing. Good things are happening.
Yeah, yeah, and that's for forever. This was just you don't go there. You know, that's not a good thing for the economy, and we are, and there was really kind of a consensus around it. But the American public that Donald Trump tapped into, the American public felt a little bit like, hey, maybe we're getting taken advantage of by a lot of these free trade deals, and Trump understood this better than a lot of politicians.
No, I think it was he did a good job on that messaging.
Yeah,
you know, I think, and so maybe he took what's available to him and did it. But, you know, so do we call Donald Trump a policy entrepreneur?
That's what I always call it, because I think if you look at a lot of the things, and tariffs are one of those areas where the opinion is really changing before Trump, you know, rides down the escalator and says and so you see the opinion polarizing on the issue, that people are more concerned about globalization. They're more concerned about free trade. And we've talked about this a little bit. It started really on the left with Occupy Wall Street, wanting fair trade, not free trade. And you see Trump sort of pull that in and use it.
Right. No, it's true. And, you know, I think the American people, when Trump started talking about tariffs, I think that they didn't realize that how many tariffs were on us from other countries.
Right.
And so once they begin to realize, they say, wait a second, you know, we're not being treated fairly.
Yes.
And he was able to make the case that why should we be a loser in every trade deal?
Right.
And I think that message, you know, transcended party a little bit. And now you still, the issue comes back if the pocketbook is really that important to the voter, which we know it is, that you better have some wins.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. Voters don't, and there's a famous poll that asks, you know, voters to define tariff. They can't define tariff, but they do have a sense of fairness, and this plays into that sense of fairness. Well, the last thing we were going to talk a little bit about was we found out today that former Vice President Dick Cheney passed away. His maybe one of the most important, most powerful vice presidents in the history of American politics.
I would think you'd have to categorize him as one of the top, most powerful vice presidents ever. Mm-hmm. He, I think George W. Bush put a lot of trust in him, and he had all this experience in government. So you bring a governor from the state of Texas to the White House. You need somebody there that knows the ropes, and certainly Cheney did. And he also had very strong opinions, so he's very powerful.
Yeah, when he was selected, I think one of the key things was that George W. Bush felt like he needed someone to balance. He was somewhat seen as maybe a little bit too humorous, maybe a little bit not serious enough, and so he needed some gravitas, and so he picked Cheney for that reason and brought him in, and Cheney provided that level of seriousness, and especially, as you said, on the foreign policy front, he seemed like someone who, you know, he very much a hawk, very strong on defense, but also someone who I think if you had doubts about George W. Bush going into the 2000 election about whether he was going to have the expertise on foreign policy on the Republican side, Cheney helped to make you feel better.
What is he, Secretary of Defense?
Yeah.
And so he had this foreign policy experience, knew a lot of the players in other countries. And so, yeah, that helped him, and probably in some ways was a really big benefit in the election, just as people felt secure. I actually I did some focus groups for a campaign, and part of the people that we were examining was George W. Bush when he was running for governor. And what the people said, we think he could be a good governor if he could just get serious. Yeah. So it's kind of that idea that kind of went with him throughout his life, George W. Bush. And so I think by bringing Dick Cheney in really was a balancing factor on that ticket.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we try to do, I think, is recognize that, go beyond partisanship and recognize that whatever your partisan affiliation, no matter how you fall on the red or the blue spectrum or Republican or Democratic, that someone like Cheney, who devoted his life to public service, we should value that.
Absolutely. He long career in government at the highest levels. Made a lot of hard decisions in his life, and as those guys do. And so, no, we have to value it and thank him for his public service, and he should be remembered as an important American. And I think it's a sad day for the family, but the whole family has been a big part of what has happened in politics over the last 30 years.
Yeah, and we can go back and we can criticize specific decisions, but I don't think there's any doubt Dick Cheney loved his country, he loved his family, he loved his state, and in all those ways he was a great public. The Bush School is about noble public service, and he was a noble public servant.
Exactly.
So, well, that's episode 34 of Inside Political Science. If this is your first time listening, click the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Inside Political Science is a production from KAMU, Aggieland's Public Television and Radio. For more information, visit tx.ag/insidepoliticalscience. Have a question for our experts? Email them at insidepolicy@tamu.edu. Also, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss a new episode.